Laurie Huston's News for the Heart is dedicated to helping you give a voice to your own soul. Our hearts have the power to free us from pain and the struggles that keep us from awakening to our true essence. Join Laurie now as we delve into our heart and soul to find the path that will open us to the possibilities and lead us to the life we love to live.
And good afternoon. This is News for the Heart. And today, well, it's the last Tuesday of the month, which means I have my awesome co-host, Tom Campbell, with me. Welcome to the show, Tom.
Thank you, Laurie. It's good to be here.
Always. And we sort of mentioned, I thought, since last month we talked about how we sabotage change, I thought it was a really good conversation. I thought we brought up some very interesting points, and I thought that we kind of play on this, not maybe sabotaging, but happiness comes from within. And no matter what happens in our life, we should be in charge of how we respond. Underneath all of our stories and our experiences and our fears and our beliefs, we're ultimately in a loving space and a happy space. If we ask ourselves, what do we want, and keep asking ourselves, because we often think of things like, oh, I just want $1 million. Well, what will that $1 million do for you? Well, hopefully, as you get down looking at and keep asking that question, what do you want? Why do you want $1 million? Ultimately, it should come to, I want to be happy. You might say free, you might say love, you might term it in whatever way you want, but ultimately, it's happiness. So, do we sabotage our happiness? Well, we often put it that it's something outside of ourselves. Like, well, when I have this or I have that, or, once this happens, then I'll be happy. And of course, that elusive happiness is because it's outside of us. It's not coming from that being place. It's not coming from within. So I thought we talked about it. And I know you have lots to say.
Well, happiness, if you are in pursuit of happiness, you will probably not find it. Happiness is not a thing that there's not a prescription for happiness. Do this, do this, do this, and then do that, and you will be happy. It's not like that. You can't find happiness. You really have to be happy. And it's a byproduct. When you do all the rest of the things right, then you are happy. And what I mean by doing all the rest of the things right, we mean what we usually talk about is get rid of your fear. As long as you have fear, you're not going to be happy, because being fearful is not a happy thing. So you have to work on getting rid of that fear, which means you have to get rid of that ego. That you have to get rid of those beliefs. You have to be authentic. You have to let go of your self-centeredness. So it's not all about you. Because, you made the comment about people who think, oh, if just I could get that, I'd be happy. Well, what they're really saying is, if I just had things the way I wanted them, if things were just the way I want them, then I'd be happy. Well, having things the way you want them generally will not make you happy, because as soon as you think you have everything the way you want it, you'll have new ones and different ones. Oh, now that I got this, now I'd like to have that. And now you're unhappy again. That doesn't work. You'll never get there with that. You have to be happy because you're not self-centered and you care about others. You have, to be happy, you have to not have buttons, or what do we call them? Trigger points. You have not to have those. If you're going to be happy, then you have to be such that it doesn't matter so much what other people do and say. You're okay. You're authentic and you are confident and you're all right in life. You don't depend on other people to define who you are and to have to verify, that you're okay. You don't need other people's recognition and praise and so on in order to make you feel good about yourself. You feel good about yourself just because you and yourself are good. You know, you're not, you don't have those fears. So happiness is a byproduct of getting rid of your fear. Mm. It's a byproduct. It's not something you go get. It's not something that happens to you if you achieve a particular thing. Because if you have a lot of fear and you have $1 million and you have everything exactly the way you want it, you're still going to be unhappy. You see, it doesn't work like that. You know, money cannot buy happiness. I guess that's an old, an old saying. You know, you can't buy happiness with money. You cannot. You can't buy happiness with manipulating people to be the way you want them to be. Oh, I'd be real happy if my children did their homework and studied real hard and were obedient and, et cetera, et cetera. And that's not the point. You know, it's not the way your children are or not are that makes you happy. Happiness has to come from within. As you say, it has to be a part of you. And the only way to get it is to get rid of that fear. Get rid of that ego. Get rid of that I need, I want. And as long as you're full of I needs, I wants, then you're not going to be happy. You're always going to be wanting and needing and won't have it the way you like it. And that will upset you. You see? So when it's not about you and it's about others, then all that goes away. Mm-hmm. It's not about what I want. It's, well, what can I give? And maybe right now there's nothing really to give. It's just, I'm just hanging out with people and it's fine. Just being there is enough. Well, then you're happy just being there. You see, and it doesn't matter that those people praise you or, think you're wonderful or whatever. That doesn't matter to you. What matters to you is that you're being part of, the solution. You're being helpful to those people, and not because of what you think you'll get from them and how they'll like you afterwards and how they'll, think highly of you. That's not the point. If that's your reason, then you'll never be happy. Because that won't work. You have to just be. That's why I say when everything else is right, then happiness just happens. You don't have to go find it. So that's where happiness comes from. Get rid of all those I wants, because all those I wants make you unhappy when you don't have. Now having, you think, will make you happy, but it won't. Because you can have, if you could just say, well, okay, I'd like you, to come here and do this, and I'd like you to do that, and I'd like to have a bank account full of endless money, and you can say all those things, but it wouldn't make you happy. Matter of fact, there's some books that were written about the people who win the lottery, and what their lives are like after they get, $50 million or whatever they get in the lottery. And very few of them turn out that the lottery makes them happy. Matter of fact, winning the lottery often ends up making them less happy than they were before they'd won the lottery. Because now suddenly there's just, the life was simple before, and now that complicates everything. And they get into stuff rather than quality. They get into a better house and a better car and better this and better that. And when you get stuff focused, then that goes on and on and on. Even if you own your own private island, well, somebody else owns a bigger island than you do, and you're unhappy, So that never ends. And you think, well, okay, if I just had even a small island, I'd be happy. Well, you wouldn't be, because you'd be on that small island, you'd be bored, and you'd be this, and you'd be that. And you'd talk to somebody, and they tell you about how much more fun they had in somebody else's bigger island. And, it just would never end, because inside you're insecure, because inside you have fears that you're not good enough, because inside, you depend on other people giving you your self-esteem. How much other people like you or fawn on you or suck up to you or whatever. That's where your self-esteem comes from. And if you don't have that, then you become depressed and unhappy. You constantly need presence, or you need attention, or you need, you need, and all of that needing is just self-centeredness. It's not about other, it's about you and your needs. And as long as you're like that, happiness will be elusive. No matter what, how much stuff you have or how good you are at manipulating, you just won't be happy. So happiness goes along with having a high quality of consciousness. It goes along with getting rid of your self-centeredness. Once the self-centeredness is gone, all those trigger points go with it. All those trigger points start with I. I don't want this. I need that. How could you do that to me? All of that, all the trigger points all start with big me's and I's, and it's all about you. So when you get rid of those fears, then you're happy. And you don't particularly need anything to make you happy. Even if you're just sitting in a room all by yourself, you're happy. Or if you're a crowd of a lot of people, you're happy. Because you just are. It's a state of being. You live in that state of being satisfied, finding peace, finding joy. You don't have to be, in the limelight, or you don't have to be, hiding. You just, wherever you are and whatever you're doing, even if you're caught in the rain on a cold night and you don't have your umbrella, it doesn't make you unhappy. It just makes you cold. And you can survive that. It's not like it's going to kill you. And then it becomes almost fun in a sense. It's part of life, getting caught in the rain sometimes. And you don't think about it in negative terms. You think about it in positive terms. Well, isn't this different? You have that sort of an attitude. So you look at the positive side of things when you let go of the self-centeredness, because now it's about, what can I give? How can I help? What's a way that I can improve things, make the world a better place, wherever the scope is, that's fine. And as you try to do those things, then it makes you happy. And as other people benefit from maybe your services or whatever, then that makes you happy. And if they don't benefit and they say, well, how come you only gave me this much? I want more. Well, that doesn't make you happy. You don't go, you ingrate, slug. You should be happy with what I give you. Well, that's your need then, to be looked up to and for people to be grateful to you. Well, it goes right back to your own fears of not being good enough, which, you're not happy. So let people be however they are and be happy with them that way. Learn to accept them that way. So-and-so, let's say they're crotchety, and maybe they're even negative, and they complain a lot. Well, you have to learn that's okay. That's just the way they are. And when they start complaining and being crotchety, then, it doesn't bother you. It's just them. It's nothing, it's not personal. When you're self-centered, everything's personal. You take everything personal because everything's about you. That's what being self-centered means. So when you're not self-centered and somebody's grouchy, or somebody says something rude to you, or somebody, says that you just, failed that miserably or whatever, and you thought you did pretty well, and, you're getting a hard time, it doesn't bother you because it's not about you. It's about them. They're grouchy. They're in a mood. They have a need to put people down. They have all this ego that only feels good if they can put other people down. So it becomes about them rather than about you. And if it is about you, maybe you did do something that wasn't good. Well, you think about it and you say, no, they're right. I should have thought about that, or I should have done that better. Well, next time I'll do it better. And you're still not unhappy. Because now you just learned something, and that makes you happy too. So you see, when you get rid of the fear, there's no way to be unhappy. You just are always happy. Everything is always good. Now, that doesn't mean that you necessarily walk around with a big grin plastered on your face and, and giggling all the time.
No?
Happiness becomes your life. you know? So you don't have to be making jokes and laughing to be happy.
Right.
You know, you just feel good. Everything is good the way it is. Everything is just fine and moving on, and everything's working as it should be, you know, and you just have this feeling that everything is good the way it should be, and there's no problems. You don't see anything negative. That's happiness.
Right.
So happiness is only attainable as a way of life when you get rid of that fear. Now, you can have happiness for short periods of time, even though you're fearful. You know, happiness comes and happiness goes. But we're not talking about, you know, something like that. People can be happy for short times because they get what they want. Oh, I've always wanted a convertible car. Now I finally can, you know, buy one, and I'm so happy. Well, that happiness doesn't last a long time. That happiness is
then it's going to rain and you're going to have to put the convertible up, or it's going to snow and you're going to have to put it away for a few months. Yeah.
Yeah. That happiness grows old, you know, and that's not so much happiness as it is probably self-satisfaction, or, you know, you feel good that you achieve something, or that you put somebody else down that you don't like, or that you know, slap someone that needed to be slapped and you're happy about it. You know, that is not real happiness.
No.
That's more self-serving stuff. Happiness I'm talking about is when life is positive, when everything in your life and the people in it are all positive, even when they're grouchy. It's okay, because that person just needs to be grouchy. Now, that's just the way they are. They haven't learned not to be grouchy yet. They're on a path. They're learning. They're growing. And right now, you know, that's the way they're going to be. They're self-centered. So they're gonna maybe try to use you, maybe even abuse you a little, but that's just the way they are. So it doesn't bother you. It's okay. You know, you can deal with that. Now, if they abuse you in a way that, you know, that hurts or that is a problem, then you need to go somewhere else.
Yeah.
Yeah. You don't need to say, oh, well, that's a, you know, little abuse. You know, all they did was, you know, beat me up. That's not a problem. You know, we're not talking about that kind of thing. You know, we're talking about your everyday life. And if people are going to be constantly rude to you and whatever, then they're really no fun to be around. So you tend to avoid them. You don't put a lot of time there. Unless, of course, you have to, because it's your significant other or your mother or your father or your sister. And then you just have to let them be and let it go. And you don't avoid them, but just they are that way. And you don't let it bother you. And what you'll find when you do that
is really hard for people.
Yeah. But what you'll find when you do that, if you just let them be and you don't get sucked into their negativity, they will start being nicer to you. Yeah. They will stop being negative, because it's kind of a game they play. They get negative, then you get negative, and they get negative, and there's this negative exchange. And that's really what they're after. That's the connection. That's how they connect to people. You know, that's the thing they want. And if you don't play the game, if you're just nice to them anyway, or neutral, or whatever, then they begin to want to be nicer to you. They leave you alone. They stop saying negative things to you because you refuse to play the negative game with them. So everything gets better. Even those people who are grouchy get less grouchy if you're a happy person. And they stop doing those things and stop pushing your buttons, because it doesn't work. Because then, you see, if they're grouchy and they say something rude and you don't, they've got no justification. Now they are the ones that are being rude, because you get rude back. Aha, well, you know, I always knew you felt that way. And now, you see, they can justify their negativity.
Right.
But if you don't get negative back to them, they just see themselves as negative and you're not. Ooh, you see, that kind of backs them up a little bit. Oh, here I am, negative and unpleasant, and they're not. Now, if I could just make them negative and unpleasant like me, I'd feel okay. I'd feel justified, and that'd be good. But when they refuse to do that, then I'm not going to do that to them anymore, because that makes me look bad. I look bad even to myself when I talk to them. So everybody will start treating you better. Everybody will find you somebody that they'd like to be around, because you're happy, you're positive, you're not complaining, you're not putting them down to make yourself feel bigger, you're not doing any of those games, and you become a popular person. You become somebody that other people, want to hang out with. So it all just works out well. And even the people, even if they're your brother or sister, your significant other, if you don't give negativity back to negativity, you raise the probability that they'll learn not to be negative. You give them a space in which they can choose not to be negative. When you give negativity back, then that's just the game that's played. Everybody's going to be negative, and that's it. But when you don't play, now they have a choice not to play either, or to stop when they're playing and nobody's playing with them. It's just they're negative. So it helps them find a space and the courage they need to grow up. And they may or may not do it, depends whether or not they're ready to grow up. But that's up to them, not up to you. So happiness is a byproduct of not having fear. Mm-hmm. It's a byproduct of being positive, always. So if you're always positive, then you probably don't have fear, because it's the fear that's what makes you negative. So just look at your life and say, well, have I been negative in the last 6 months? Well, let's make that, it's the last 6 hours. Have I been negative in the last 6 hours? Or the last 6 minutes, For many people, the last 6 minutes would be a better one, because a lot of people are just negative all the time. If even in normal conversation, they can only talk about what's wrong and what doesn't work. Everything is either a complaint, about life, about other people, about their situation, and they just live in a negative space. And that means that they're not happy. They're not having a good time. Life is not good for them. And if that continues, it generally ends up in depression. That's that path. It tends to spiral downwards. If you get started on that path, unless you can pull yourself out of it, it tends to get worse and worse and worse. And then you end up in a depression. Life sucks. Everything's bad. Everything's wrong. You never get a break. Nobody really likes you. And, oh, woe is me, and then you get down into the self-pity, and now you're stuck. Yeah. Now it takes a major act on your part to drag yourself back up out of that self-pity and depression. But a lot of people live their lives there. It's not that uncommon for people to be living most of their life in a state of depression. Now, maybe it's not a life-threatening depression, but it's just a state of negativity, basically. What do we call that? Mild depression or functional depression or whatever. Yeah, you can still work at your job. You can still have a relationship, but you're just not happy. And that's, walking depression. I don't know what you'd call it, but a lot of people live that way. Yeah. And that's just their life. Their life is just a long series of negative things that happen and negative feelings.
And the ego just keeps building it. Like the ego will just not let go. Like if you're in that state, then it's all ego just pushing your buttons and saying, well, this person's better. And it's just that constant mind chatter in your head and ego just going, you're not good enough here. Yeah. It's really hard to get out of if you're there.
It is. These things, I say spiral, but what I mean by that if you're negative, it's easier to be more negative. Mm-hmm. If you act more positive, it's easier to get more positive. The things reinforce each other. So when you become negative, that kind of puts you in a downward slide. That's what I call the spiral, for negativity. That's that slippery slope. You start going down that way, and it's a lot easier to get more negative than it is to go uphill against the grain and get more positive. So people tend to get worse until they hit some kind of floor, and maybe they can just maintain that floor, and just live that way. That can just be their life. They say, well, life just sucks. Life just is hard. Life just, is unhappy. And I don't know whether I'd say that most people are that way. Probably not, but certainly a large number of people, even if it's not the majority, it'd be a pretty large minority to live their life like that. And what a terrible waste to do that, when all of that negativity that they see and all of that pain and the suffering and life is hard, it's all self-created. It's all created out of their own choices. It's not like this is an awful world and it's hard to live here. People go to that idea because it absolves them from responsibility, but that's not really what's going on. It's not that it's such a hard world. Even when the world is hard, you can be happy.
Right.
You don't have to, you don't have to be wealthy to be happy. You could be dirt poor and, scrounge every day just to get enough food to eat, and you can still be happy. A lot of people would say, oh, that's impossible. If you're scrounging in food, you'd be miserable and you'd be upset. Not if you weren't fearful. If you're not fearful, then you could be in a situation that was difficult. And you'd be okay with it, because life can be hard sometimes, but that doesn't mean that you have to be negative.
Right.
That life is hard is something that you have to endure sometimes. Things happen. And that shouldn't make you negative. What it does is makes you stronger. So, I know people who are poor or have really sad things going on with them, and they're not unhappy about it. And that's not all they talk about. That's just their life, and they bear that well because they have to. Things happen. A child dies, or you get some kind of disease, wasting disease that over the next 10 years, it's going to kill you. Well, these aren't things to jump up and, and go, yes, these are not good things to have happen, but you deal with them and you grow up from them and you accept that if that's the way it has to be, then that's the way it is. And you'll accept that and deal with it in a positive way. You don't feel sorry for yourself or whatever. You function, do what you have to do. You have responsibilities. They're not always the things you want to do. Well, a lot of times those responsibilities are things that you need to do, that you must do. You're responsible. You're responsible to do them, but it's not really what you do if you weren't responsible. Well, rather than complaining about that, you need to say, well, this is a responsibility of mine. I will do it. And I'll do it, with a smile. I'll do it cheerfully because it's mine and I own it. And then you do it. So just because things are difficult for you, almost everybody sees that things are difficult for them, isn't a reason to be negative. It's not a reason to be unhappy. You can live in a difficult situation and still be happy. So happiness isn't about what you meet up with on the outside world.
Right.
Happiness is about what you bring to the table from the inside of you. And you just have to stay positive. Now, when I say stay positive, again, I have to mention, I'm not talking about acting positive. It's not gritting your teeth and forcing a smile on your face when you feel miserable. That's not what we're talking about, because that doesn't make you happy. That just generally makes you less happy. Be authentic. It's not about your image. It's not about what you do. It's about what you are. That's an important distinction. It's not just being sticking a smile on your face and not complaining, but you're miserable inside. Now you just get more miserable. So,
because nobody understands me and nobody's listening, and
yes, right.
Yeah.
So it's not that. It's not sucking it up and toughing it out, being very negative inside but positive outside. That is a place that generally degrades and makes you worse off rather than better. You got to be authentic. But if you're authentic and you've gotten rid of fears and you're positive, you can't help but be happy. You just will be happy, and it doesn't matter really what happens to you. Again, happiness isn't, jumping up and down and laughing. That's not what we mean. We mean that life is good and it's okay and everything's fine. And not only that, it's good. You like it. It's positive. You're learning. You're growing. That makes you happy.
Yeah. It's an interesting state of mind or state of being, I guess, because you can't force yourself. Like you said, you need to be authentic. So when you're in, a place where you're sad or something's happened, you still have to be with that and then let it go, because the more you suffer in that, then that's the ego. If you can somehow find a gift within it or a bigger picture, or just let it go somehow.
Yes, well, you let it go and you move on.
Yeah.
It doesn't mean that you can never be sad. There are things that happen that are sad. You can be sad about, your significant other or your parent or your child who is very unhappy. You can say, oh, that's too bad that they're having such a hard time. So sadness is fine, but that's not the same as being negative.
Right.
Sadness isn't necessarily negative. It's just an emotion. Now, if you get lost in that sadness and there's nothing in your life but sadness, then that's a problem. But if you feel sad because you see somebody and they're just hurting themselves and you see them hurting themselves and you know that there's nothing you can do about that, there's nothing you can say or nothing you can do that'll really make much difference, then that's sad. But then you recognize it and then you let it go because it's not yours. You just, you let that go and you're kind to that person, but it's sad, but you don't dwell in it. You don't wallow in that sadness, that then becomes negative and that becomes self-pity. So, if you're going to wallow in something, wallow in gratitude. You should always think positively. And one of the things about thinking positively is to always be aware of the good things, all the positive things in your life. And there's lots of them for most people. I mean, there's very few people, particularly in our culture, in Canada or in the U.S., that don't have a warm place to sleep in the winter and don't have food to eat and so on. There's a few. There's people that are homeless. There's people that live under the bridge. We have that, and that's sad. But it's very, very few people. It's probably 1/100th of 1% or 1,000th of 1% or something. So think about it. Well, life is good. I maybe don't like my job so much, but it pays the bills and, I do nice things with my family and we all have a good time. So I'll accept the job. I'll go do it. I'll collect my pay. And, that's one of the things I just have to do, my responsibility, to do that. And then when you're at that job, complaining all the time, you do it. Do it positively. Even if it's something that you don't particularly care to do that much. You do it anyway because it needs to be done and you get paid for it. So you have a positive attitude toward it. And you think all the good things, all the positive things that are in your life. Then wallow in gratitude. That's fine. Don't wallow in self-pity. That's terrible. Yeah, don't wallow in the negative. Wallow in the positive. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. I mean, we kind of get caught up, but I think if we haven't grown up enough, we're going to have triggers. But the thing is that we can then we have a choice where we want to stay or whether we want to shift it. And I think that's the important thing, is that we always have a choice.
Exactly. Yeah, that's a good point. I don't want people to think that either you're perfect or you're awful.
Right.
It's not that sort of thing. It's not that, oh, I've got a fear. That's terrible. I'm failing. Most everybody has fears. That's okay. It's not that you need to be perfect. It's just that you need to be growing. You need to be learning. There's no penalty that you have a lot of fear. There's only a penalty if you don't do anything about it. Then the penalty is that you have to live with that fear all the time if you don't do anything about it. That's the downside. So everybody is a mixture of love and fear. Most everybody, they have some love in their hearts, in their life. But if they have fear too. So they have things that make them unhappy and maybe things that make them happy in their life. But you need to change that balance, change that ratio so that there's more things that are happy things and less things that are unhappy things. That's really the point of it all. It's not to feel bad about yourself because you're not perfect. It's to say, I am who I am. Be authentic. Here's me, warts and all. All right, now, what can I do? How can I learn not to be negative? Well, just maybe stop complaining. Stop having all your conversations are about what's wrong and the things you don't like. Instead, decide that you're only going to say positive things. And if you don't have anything positive to say, you're not going to say anything at all. Well, just do that for a few months. You see, now, yes, that's your intellect, taking charge there. But it may just turn out to be a habit. It may just turn out that then you realize that you feel better. Life is better. You're not as depressed as you were, Well, then you've just learned something. And that is what's important. Not being perfect. Just making an effort to change. Making an effort to grow. Making an effort to get rid of that fear and that negativity. And if you do that, even if it takes you, 5 years just to get rid of one piece of negativity, well, that's good. Another 5 years, you'll get a second one. The next 5 years, you'll get another one. And pretty soon, you'll find that happiness. Don't get frustrated with yourself. Oh, I just can't do it. I've tried and it doesn't work. Again, that's self-pity. What you need to do is say, well, if that didn't work, then I'll try harder. I'll take a different tact. I'll have a different strategy. I'll try again. You see, that's being positive about it. I can do this. I just need to keep working at it. That's positive. Oh, I can't do it. It's just, I've tried and it doesn't work. That's being negative. So just stay positive and learn and grow. And every, month, every year, you'll become less negative and more positive. And before long, you too will be happy almost all the time. So that's the point. It was good to say that because I think people, particularly listen to me talk, they think, oh, I'm so far gone. I've got all this fear. My life is a disaster and I am negative. And they feel all that and then they're kind of crushed by it. They feel kind of hopeless in the face of it. But that's not the way to look at it. The way to look at it is you are exactly how you are right now. Own it. Now, start making a strategy to change it. See, that's a positive attitude. And then work toward changing it. And if what you're doing doesn't work, do something else. And just keep working at it. And what will happen is that before long, you'll be a totally different person. And your life won't be that sad line of, pain and frustration that it used to be. That stuff will just go away. And suddenly things will start happening, and you'll get that promotion, and you'll get that, new job, and that significant other that you really been looking for will turn up. Once you get positive, all kinds of positive things start to happen, because now you're seeding the probability in the future for positive things to happen, instead of seeding that future probability for negative things to happen. So suddenly your luck changes. Well, it's not luck so much as it is your attitude.
Luck. I'm not quite sure even what that is anymore. It's not, yeah. How do you even define luck? That's not important. It's what.
No, it's not, luck is when things just seem to always go your way. That's good luck, I guess. And bad luck seems to be when nothing goes your way. Everything goes the other way.
Right.
And, like that, there's a blues song, and one of the lines is, if it wasn't for bad luck, I wouldn't have no luck at all. So,
gotta love those country songs.
Yeah. Anyhow.
Talk about being depressed. Let's listen to country music for a while.
Yeah. So yes, that's, luck basically is what happens to people who are positive. Positive people are lucky people, because positive things just keep happening to them. So if you're positive, then you'll be lucky, but it's not really luck. It's not like there's something out there called luck that, comes and goes. You create that luck. You create that luck by being positive. The whole system starts to interact with you in a more positive way, just because you're positive. That's our intent modifies future probability. That positive intent makes positive things happen more often around you. So you become positive, and you suddenly get lucky. Everything just works the way it works. You'll just find that you're amazed even day to day about the things that you do turn out to be just exactly the right thing that you should have done. Even you get in a big traffic jam and you think, oh no, I got in this traffic jam, now I'm going to be late. And then you find out that down the road, 10 minutes where you would have been if you didn't get stuck in that jam was a huge accident. Something happened there. And then you go, wow, I'm glad I got in that traffic jam because that kept me out of that accident. So your whole life like that. That means you start seeing the positiveness in things rather than looking at the negative parts of things. And when you focus on that positiveness, then you feel luckier, because you see all kinds of things that are just terrific, and it makes you happy. Your whole life works that way.
Right. Well, without going into another topic, I think we're good with this. I know that we have a little bit of time, but that'll then take us over. So I think this was good. This was a good conversation about happiness and how it's our choice, and it's not about feeling joy all the time. It's about just letting go of our fears. So it's a good topic.
Being happy and being positive are very, very similar things. When you're positive, you're happy. When you're negative, you're unhappy. So you don't have to be jumping up and down and giggling, to be happy. You just have to be positive. And then life is good. You see everything in a positive way. And that's the definition of happy. When your life is just, everything's positive. So it's not a thing you get by pursuing. It's a thing you get by being. By getting rid of your negativity.
I love it. All right. You've been listening to News for the Heart. We begin at the Heart of What Matters with Tom Campbell and, consciousness of happiness. And we'll be back next month. Thanks, Tom.
Thank you, Laurie.